Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 97 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. It's just me and Bill Sutton today. Bill, how's it going?
Going well, Andy. I'm doing fine, thanks.
Feels like it's been forever since
It has been a while. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy January. Heck, almost happy February. We're almost there.
Right. Yep, we're right dead in the middle of the month.
It's crazy. The first month, I did an iGel podcast this morning, and it feels like the first month, January, is just it just flashes by every year.
Yep. Agreed.
Between post holidays and even existing holiday in the middle of the month, and then sales kickoff type things. The Citrix one is going on right now while we're speaking, and just trying to get try to grab 2022 by the cape and hang on.
Exactly.
But we'll get there. Well, I appreciate you jumping on, and it's just you and I. Ben had a previous commitments. And we got a little bit of an interesting topic here to cover. I'm going to share my screen for those who watch the video later. And we're actually doing a review of a blog by another Citrix partner, which, it's tons of value in what other partners are doing. And I really just saw the topic and read through it briefly a week or two or three ago and said, yeah, let's cover that one. And then as you and I jumped on to talk a little deeper, and it turns out this is the what I believe to be the former MTM guys, who was a XenTegra-like EUC focused partner from back in the day. It looks like they've been acquired by a company called ATSG out of New York. And Stacy Lowe has written a blog entitled 3 Priorities to Consider When Choosing Hybrid Work Technologies. I love the topic. Let's cover it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I love it too. This is very timely.
So I think she starts us off by just kind of introducing why this matters, work from home, pandemic, hybrid work. Why do you think this is so timely, that using your own words there?
Well, I think, the pandemic has kind of made hybrid work the new normal for a lot of people. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, how that concept sticks. I think it's going to stick around for a long time, if not our lifetimes. Some folks are bringing employees back into the workplace and they're going begrudgingly, and folks have gotten used to working from home and having the flexibility. I mean, to you and me, this is not all that new, but I think to a lot of traditional businesses where the ability to work remote is able to be handled or able to be done that way, then I think we're going to see more and more of it go that way.
So I've been, because there's ice, we had snow over the weekend, there's ice here. I waited to go into the office today, and it's almost 11 o'clock now.
Yep.
And, I'm working from home. And the biggest challenges I've had working from home today is not technology. I've got laptop, multi-monitor, keyboard, mouse. It's, my family. My family is doing school remote today. My wife works from home. Having to move the car or take out the trash has been my biggest challenges today, not getting work done.
Yeah, that can always be a challenge. It's a balance.
Yeah, I need to go to the office just to get away and get some work done. Not the tech's not the problem. But I did hear your comment just now, and I'm interested philosophically to talk about that briefly. So, have we created a world where working remote is so doable that we can no longer expect people to go into the office? Then what do we do about measuring productivity? Are we just slowly getting siphoned? Are we siphoning the productivity away, or have we enabled productivity? What's your thoughts on that as somebody who's probably worked from home for a decade or more?
Yeah, it's interesting. I really think you have to focus on outcomes. It's not about having someone in the workplace. I mean, I think they've proven that having someone in the workplace 8 hours a day does not mean you get 8 hours of productivity out of them. And I think the way you evaluate that, as opposed to time at the workplace, is you focus on goals and outcomes and the timeliness of those outcomes. It's really more performance based than it is time based anymore. That doesn't apply to every industry, but I think that's part of how we're going to measure it. Everything I'm reading in the Wall Street Journal and CNBC and other business publications seems to indicate that remote work and hybrid work. I think hybrid work is probably where we're going to end up. A lot of employers in my area, in the Richmond, Virginia area, are a couple of days in the office, 3 days at home, or vice versa, something like that, some sort of hybrid measure where they schedule time in the workplace. The interesting component of all of this is going to be what impact, if any, it has on the real estate market and occupancy in large office buildings that were built 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or less. With this shift in the paradigm of where we work, what impact is it going to have on those industries?
So that's interesting you say that, because I had two thoughts running in my head. One is the personal real estate market, homes, and the need to have a bigger house with a dedicated office or two in it. Going back to my comments a while ago about I have 3 or 4 people have come in the office this morning and needed to use this particular setup, and I'm camped out here, so that was a problem. And then the byproduct of all this, the commercial real estate market, and what happens. I mean, you're kind of hybrid. So do you need zero footprint, or do you need a fraction of what you needed before? Do you need everything you needed before? It's going to be interesting. I'm really concerned that the commercial real estate market fallout that is around the corner is going to have a massive impact on the economy here.
Yeah, I think that it has the potential for that, and I really it's going to depend on how organizations define their policies regarding hybrid work or in-office work. I know a major company here in town that scrapped building a second building because of the remote concept that came about via the pandemic. They were already on the fence, but they've essentially scrapped building another, 500,000 or 600,000 square foot office tower simply because it doesn't make sense. If they can do a 2 day a week on-prem, 3 day a week remote, or vice versa, some sort of hybrid work method, then they could save a significant sum on real estate, and they're going to sell the land. So
yeah. And then what happens to our inner cities where people had started moving back to them to be close to work? Now work doesn't have to be there anymore. Is there enough appeal for this generation to go there anyway, so they can be near the restaurants and nightclubs and stuff? Or they're going to come back out to the suburbs again?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting dynamic. I don't have an answer for that or even an opinion, although I think that a lot of those folks are used to the kind of the smaller work, the smaller living space. A lot of those younger folks aren't really that interested in buying homes. They're more interested in being more mobile, I guess. And the rise of the WeWorks and in my community, the gatherers, the co-working spaces. I think we're going to see more and more of that probably.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, what happens to these executive shareable office spaces, which give you that social piece you need, but don't require you to be there, and can be flexible, and you have an account that allows you to pop into any of those anywhere in the country, and you're working again.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got one right around the corner. It just opened, and I haven't explored it yet, but from what I hear, they're booming.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, well, let's bring this focus back to the tech side of it and things you need to be thinking about. And really, and just to highlight again, it's a great article. This says priority 1. I guess we'll talk through it as if it's the number 1 most important thing, and then maybe we'll come back and think through that in a minute. But number 1, addressing connectivity and security issues head on. That seems like 2 interesting things to bolt together. It makes sense as to why they're bolted together. They're the kind of 2 things. So what are they covering here with the connectivity and security part of the conversation?
Well, I think it comes down to different types of devices and how you get them connected to the environment, pairing them with managed services. And then, of course, having a uniform security policy for both remote and in-person workers. You don't want to have a different policy for in-person versus remote. And if you design your infrastructure in a way that they both are experiencing or have the same experience through like a hosted VDI or something along those lines, then you make it more easy to support and manage. Obviously, the location of the user is going to be important to making sure they have sufficient connectivity, but security is key here, where you've kind of, the endpoint may matter, may not matter. I know that you and I have talked about what we're doing from an endpoint perspective, and other companies need to consider that as well, with all of the technology that enables us to manage devices much more easily than we used to be able to. Maybe device management is not really talked about here, but the concept of managing the device and securing the device on the endpoint, I think is going to be key in this.
So Bill, this is the VPN portion of the conversation? Is that
Yeah,
what you do?
I think to some degree this is VPN. It's got to be secure. They talk about in priority number 2, and we'll get to that in a minute, the concept of being able to scale that. And I think what we found during the pandemic was that a lot of companies were not in a position to scale their VPN sufficiently to support the user base. I know of a couple of examples of that where they sent everybody home reluctantly. And when they got home, they found out, A, they didn't have enough capacity on their VPN concentrators, and B, they didn't have the bandwidth to support all the incoming connections and had to scramble. And when it comes to connectivity, you can't just necessarily turn that on a dime. It can take some time to get that ramped up. So that's something to definitely be from a scalability perspective and a connectivity perspective. You've got to consider those things.
Yeah, and that was kind of a joke on my part that we'd use VPN for that. However, I don't know if you want to ballpark it, but I would say what I'm seeing through the pandemic is 60-70% of people truly did just turn on VPNs and try to, do what they were doing in the office, but remotely.
Yep. And I think that's exactly what happened. And I think that, that kind of addresses the connectivity problem, but it doesn't really help the security problem. Because I think over the years, we've seen that, yeah, you can lock down VPNs, but it's a tough measure to do. And a lot of folks don't do it right.
Yeah. It's like putting a nice door on the front of your house with locks on it, but then leaving it wide open. You kind of didn't really accomplish much.
No, or leaving the window open.
Yeah. A nice locked front door, but a window that's cracked so you can get in if you need to.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So let's, we did a whole podcast on that. Let's move on to the next one, which is scalable and cost effective. You find a solution that is better and more robust than VPN, but next thing you know, you've just created a whole nother IT budget. Help us understand what we're covering here.
Yeah, I think what the author is trying to get at here again is the scalable solutions like VPNs just didn't work well in the pandemic and in the hybrid work scenario. You really should be focused on something not only that is scalable and cost effective, but they also mention in here the concept of making sure that everyone accesses the same system, has the same experience. And you and I, we've dealt with this before where we've had customers, we still do to some degree, where they have folks in the office that access the environment and their applications in one manner, and then folks in remote offices access them in a different manner. It creates a support issue because it's not a consistent method of access, a consistent way of working. And I think that's what they're getting out here, particularly as it relates to the cost effectiveness of it, the ability to support it. If it's all the same solution, the same method, the same experience, then it's much easier to support it as well as scale it up, because you're scaling up a single system versus multiple disparate systems.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way you talked about it. Some people in one office versus some people in another office, because of the remote hybrid world. At any point in time, we're all in 10 different offices.
Exactly.
And then going back to the previous one, we talked about connectivity. Especially when you're dealing with people that aren't technical by nature, helping them understand that, like in my household, we got, this computer's, I've got a brand new laptop. It's 6 months old. It's got a Core i7, 16 or more gigs of memory, a 500 gigabyte or higher SSD hard drive. And I walk in the office every once in a while and I'm told this computer sucks. I'm like, this computer does not suck. There's no way this computer sucks. What does suck at the moment is the network connectivity. And I'll give you a quick funny story. So I've got a mesh network in my house, and I keep one of the devices on this desk with a wired, Cat5 connection into this computer, so that networking Wi-Fi is not an issue. It's fast, it's connected, and I rely on the mesh network device to get us in and out of the network from here. Well, my son came home from college, and he took one of the mesh network devices, the one that sits on this desk, and he put it up in his room for gaming purposes. Well, all of a sudden, I'm using air quotes here, the computer sucked again. And I'm like, what in the world happened? In fact, my 12-year-old's showing me a note at the door right now. I can't see that. It's funny. Just bring it in. I've got on my reading glasses, so I can't see the note at the door. Nonetheless, the connectivity.
Do you want BLT lunch?
Yes. They asked me if I wanted lunch. That's great. So anyway, connectivity, right? Connectivity and speed of connectivity, and people understanding that, remote sessions over a 200 milliseconds of latency versus 80 or 20,
right?
Game changer. When you're in the office, it was gig at the desktop. You didn't know that bandwidth was even a thing because it just happened.
Yeah, and if I think you bring up a good point there. Kind of going back to priority one, the concept of addressing connectivity. When you're talking about hybrid work, what if you've got folks that live in a rural part of the country or a rural part of the county, where they're lucky to get a 3 meg DSL connection going back to the 90s, much less a fiber gig connection, that folks that are closer to the city are getting. And that's a consideration when you talk about hybrid work. Those folks probably need to come into the office more. We need to come up with other methods of connectivity to address that. And then you've got, obviously, I know like our PM that lives in Michigan, his kids are home and having to do virtual school while him and his spouse are both working from home. And then you've got maybe a grandmother that's streaming a movie on Netflix. Put all that together on a modest wireless network, and you've got an issue potentially.
Yeah. And then going back to priority two, cost. Yep. So, you live near one of our salespeople. You live closer into civilization than he does. Right. And he told me the other day he was paying for the most expensive, best connectivity he had out there, and it was still, fairly nothing compared to what you have sitting here on a fiber network that's right outside my window. But it costs more. His costs more to have less. So it gets down to priority two. How do you find something that's cost effective and scalable and gets the job done? And we're just not quite in a world where it's equal for everybody.
Yeah, that's why that's why it's got to be hybrid. And some folks are going to have to make hard choices. I just can't work from home. Maybe they've got to go into the office, or maybe one day they can work from home. They can do off network work or do a basic work where the bandwidth required is minimal. There are ways to overcome some of this. There's some new technologies coming out. There's initiatives from the government to get broadband pushed out into rural areas. That could take a decade, but there are initiatives to try to shore this up, but it's going to take time and money.
Yeah, time and money, right? You can solve all things through time and money,
right?
And you hybrid work, better technology, smarter technologies. Even if you stop and think about where we're at today with, say, a Citrix UDP, EDT,
right.
HDX protocol scenario where it's thinner, it's smarter. It doesn't have to show you every picture on the screen. It wants you to show you what's changing and focusing on there using UDP versus TCP. We've come a long way. Luckily, the pandemic happened now and not 10 years ago when we were threatening it could have happened. The technology is so much better, both from a work and personal perspective. The ability to have 10 apps on your TV that can allow you to watch content all the time is awesome. At the same time, that might be the reason why your spouse in the other room can't get their job done.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Third priority, and I think the number 3 of 3 here is provide a positive user experience. Oh my, that's like the hardest one.
Oh yeah.
And when I say it's the hardest one, Bill, think for a minute. Listeners, think for a minute. Think about your favorite restaurant, your current favorite restaurant. So Bill, you can say it out loud or not, but your current favorite restaurant. You got one?
Yeah, it's probably Bookbinders down in the Cary Street area, the bottom, okay. What we call in downtown Richmond.
How many times you been there?
Oh Lord, probably a half a dozen at least, maybe 10. Okay. In the past couple of years, past maybe 40 years.
Let's say you've been there 10 times, and every time it's been a good experience.
95% of the time, yes.
Okay. So what happens if you go next week and you just happen to get that one waiter, waitress in a bad mood, and all of a sudden it's a bad experience? Does your thought on that restaurant change, at least in the short, mid, or long term?
It might change in the short term, but when you look at the totality, I'd probably at least give them another chance or two.
Yeah. What I'm getting at there is it only takes one negative experience to ruin a whole bunch of positive experiences.
It does. It would largely depend on how negative. It's all, it's all levels of shades, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I get your point. You're right. It doesn't take much for people sour, and it kind of goes back to the old days where we still have executives that come to us and say, well, I had Citrix 20 years ago. There's no way I'm putting Citrix in my environment today. Right. Well, it's a whole lot different now than it was 20 years ago, as we know.
Well, and the supporting things around it. Their network is 100 times, if not more, better than it was then, more reliable, faster.
Right.
That guy who was standing up Citrix for the first time has now done it 30 times.
Right.
and he gets it better. The protocol's smarter. All these different reasons why they shouldn't be blaming Citrix, the company, the technology, when it could have been lots of other things that caused it. Anyway, so positive user experience is what we're talking about here in this third priority. Yeah, man, if you got the answer to that one, lay it down. I'd like to hear it.
Well, the interesting thing here is if you read this article, the first part of this, I'm sorry, this section, the first part of it talks about the importance of team unity and health. And this is one of those things where where we've got hybrid work or remote work where we need to meet. We are a social people, most of us. Mm-hmm. We want to be around our coworkers. There's some benefit to being around the coworkers, the office chatter, the water cooler, quote unquote, talk. Standing by the copier in the old days, those sorts of things had benefits because people would often collaborate that way. And so now we need to structure an environment that creates positive experiences in a similar way where they're not in person. I think last week when we were in Nashville, it demonstrated the benefit of being connected, as you and I talked about before we got on this. And I think that's a big part of the positive user experience considering the totality. The technology needs to enable that to the extent possible. It's not going to be the same, but it needs to enable it. And then obviously other positive user experiences are things like single sign-on, performant solution, things of that nature, of course.
Yeah, let's talk through both of those. So you're a great example, and you weren't the only one that I called and said, "Hey, how you feeling after the trip?" "Oh, I'm a little sick, but not the end of the world." And I was like, "Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry that happened." You're like, "Oh, I wouldn't have missed it for the world." I'm like, "Oh, no. Okay." Some people came home sick, but they were so happy that we did it, and they got that human element at least for this month, and try to do more stuff. But we've all been sheltered way too long, and people are ready to get out.
Yeah, we have. Too much bourbon didn't help either, but that is what it is. So
there were some happy people at moments last week. also some hungover people the next morning.
Yeah,
I was like, "Are you sick or are you hungover or both?"
Yeah.
Okay, and then and this article is going to go here in a few minutes. It's going to talk about virtualization specifically in parts of what I brought up a lot last week. It's going to talk about virtualization. It's going to talk about desktop as a service. To me, what we're really talking about is digital workspace experience, which we talked about last week, being really what we're all trying to accomplish in a positive digital workspace. And you brought up things that are covered here in the article, whether it's access to files, whether it's access to applications, whether it's a single identity that can be used for single sign-on, but has secure practices of multi-factor tied to it. How do you take all these things that we have to incorporate into a true digital workspace experience and make it secure and make it easy and make it better all at the same time? That's the nirvana, right?
That is the nirvana. And since this is a Citrix podcast, Citrix can enable this when it's done right. And to get it done right, you call XenTegra because we can do it right. We can make it perform well. We can enable multi-factor. We can enable single sign-on. But those are the things, obviously, that the solution just needs to flat out work. I know that sounds simple, but it just needs to be able to work and work well for the end user and to create that positive user experience. They shouldn't have to authenticate 3 or 4 times. They shouldn't have multiple ways to access applications. They shouldn't have to create their own username and password to every SaaS app. All of those things need to be rolled into a single identity, a single access point or workspace where they can get to all of their work from one location, and it performs well and it just flat works. And at the end of the day, that's going to create a big part of that positive user experience, and they're going to be able to get their work done. And circling back to the first topic, that's going to enable hybrid work to demonstrate the kind of efficiencies and outcomes that business owners want.
Yeah. And I'll take this into one of my favorite topics, so I'll use my experience just happened. My kids, awesome. They brought me a sandwich. Great. I didn't expect that. That's a great experience. They didn't bring the napkin. They didn't bring the napkin. And I have this moment of euphoria. Hey, that was great. And then now I got to call them back and ask for a napkin. What they didn't do, which I need to, try to train myself and my employees and my company and my family to do, is as they hey, what else? Like communication, right? Communication is the key to that.
Yep.
And I think a big part of this poor user experience or provide a good user experience conversation is constantly be asking, what's working, what's not working. And it's a hard thing for people in IT to do, because the more you ask, the more work you're going to get. It's like, walking up and saying, hey, what do you need for your meal? What are you missing? You want coffee? Do you need extra utensils? And if the answer is yes to any of that, it just means more work for you, and it doesn't change how much you get paid. It doesn't change your tip. Maybe it does. But it's that constant communication and always trying to figure out, okay, what's missing, and how do we, in all three of these things, how do we fill in the gaps?
Yeah, we need to create that feedback loop, and we need to nurture it and make sure that it's working and that everybody's comfortable feeding back and accepting the feedback and acting on it. That's important, both, in terms of what you were just mentioning, as well as, as an overall business. And we're taking initiatives, as as XenTegra, to get feedback from customers through surveys, through the CSA program or the customer success program, et cetera. So all of those things kind of come together to try to get that kind of feedback that we need from our customers. But internal feedback is critical in an organization that's delivering applications and desktops and content this way. They need to understand from the user, how's it doing? How are we doing? Where do we need to improve? I think studies have shown that users will click on that log on button 4 times or 3 times before they'll call the help desk. Right. Well, I need to know they're clicking on that button 3 times. And if I can get that from a survey, or if I can get that from metrics, then we can help fix that and change that perception.
Right. Survey, metrics, analytics,
exactly.
Or just talking to people and listening, right? Listening to see. Yeah. Listen to see what's working. Okay, so
that's what we do. I think that's what we're doing less and less of, and I think we need to circle back to that. To be honest.
Well, how you gonna listen to Bob tell you what's going on at the water cooler when you and Bob never show up at the water cooler anymore together?
That's true. Again, yeah.
You got to force it to happen.
That's right.
And it's like I tell my kids, now's the time not to be an introvert. Now's the time to be more of an extrovert, because the people that are going to use what's going on as a reason to be more introverted, those are the people that you can now beat to the punch going forward and outperform or at least appear to perform just because you're putting yourself out there.
Right.
So next section of the blog, the title of it says why your company should adopt virtualization. I'm going to get on my soapbox real quick and change that to say why your company should adopt a digital workspace and virtualization, in this case, probably desktop virtualization or in-user compute virtualization is a big part of that. Just kind of walk through the bullets here. The first one says accessibility from anywhere. I think we've kind of covered that.
Yep, definitely. Interestingly enough, I read an article yesterday or the day before. I've been kind of sequestered in my office for the past few days, so read a lot, and the article was about a guy from New Jersey that moved to Tulsa because Oklahoma was offering an incentive for people to come to Tulsa, and he could work from anywhere. So he got the incentive and moved there for a year and saved a whole boatload of money. And now he's bought an RV, is going to go drive around the country. And I don't know that that's something I would personally do, but the point is he can access from anywhere. People can do their jobs from anywhere.
Yeah, that's another topic. I love that people are now empowered to go live and work anywhere, but at some point, does it come back around to bite you where you're living in the middle of nowhere and you're getting some state benefit for doing so, but now all of a sudden you're limited to one job and that's it. I think right now the world's your oyster, but
yeah,
I don't know if there's enough pearls in there to satisfy us all.
There may not be. You're right.
Next one, which is really interesting, and I've had people quantify in both directions for me, is increased business because you're able to work more, you're able to cover more, or you're able to hide more. Which one is it, or is it both?
That's a good question. I think this is about follow the sun model. Having folks on the West Coast, the East Coast, overseas, the ability to have people working around the clock. I mean, this is not really anything necessarily new, but I think that the digital workspace concept makes it easier and enables it better. And we do have customers doing this that have developers in foreign countries that are working in the middle of the night using VDI back to the mothership. So yeah, I can see where this could have a benefit, but I think it's really focused on follow the sun type thing.
Right. The next one says improved security. I think that's very possible and even probable, but potentially could have the opposite impact.
Absolutely. This is virtualization obviously does enable this. particularly when you compare it to something like a VPN, giving really solid workspaces to the users and doing that multi-factor with a single identity helps keep things safe, in theory, and simple access.
Well, let's take that specific one you gave. So I've got a VPN in place. I've got some network detection things going on to see what's happening inside that VPN, and then all of a sudden I give somebody access to a desktop or application over some remote presentation protocol, and the VPN or the analytics associated with the network can't see that. I just went right around the locked front door and went in the back door, and maybe if the security team's not careful, they don't even know to be looking for that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. All right. Less reliance on internal IT. I think this is really talking more about as a service type of offerings, whether it's a virtual desktop as a service or some other SaaS application as a service. All of a sudden, you are accessing a world that's built to be accessed from anywhere, including the office. And IT, plays less of a role keeping it up every day. They just make sure they provide you the access.
Yep. This kind of also plays into the concept of managed services, as we've seen a lot of IT teams are very lean, and having a managed service environment in place can help ensure that you don't have to worry about it as much, and it's always on, or at least it has a very high degree of reliability.
Yeah, somebody else's problem, right? It's they're managing it for the masses, and they've got it up and running for that larger group of people. So you assume there's more urgency to get it up and keep it up, and then you're not relying on your IT team as much to be the sole point of contact for that.
Exactly.
Sole point of responsibility. Cost effective. This one's interesting, right? Because you got all this costs money to get up and implemented, but in theory, you're moving from CapEx models to OpEx models, and maybe less reliance on the IT, the previous one, and all of a sudden you've got less headcount to keep up. And in theory, it should all be getting better, more secure, and more cost effective at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree. And obviously, cloud-based, more consumption-oriented, helps keep the cost down, at least over the long haul.
Or does it turn into the world I live in now, where I used to pay for a cable provider? I got rid of those guys for my TV, and now I've got 10 different applications I'm paying, and I don't realize I'm paying more.
Yeah, I was at a party back before Christmas, and we were lamenting the fact that we have all these various streaming providers. And there was a guy at the party who said, "I wish somebody would just develop a packaged offering that provided all of this content." And I said, "Yeah, it's called cable TV. I mean, that's what we had." And it seems like we're going full circle. And we're seeing a similar thing in other areas of business, including technology, and that is everything is as a service. And over time, you got to be careful about that, and because you can end up with things you're not using that you're still paying for, and you don't even know it.
Yeah, for sure. And now you're locked into some subscription thing, or maybe not locked in, but you want that one piece of content that you can only get through that one provider, right? And you'll keep paying the $10, $15 a month just for that one thing that you can't give up.
Exactly.
And think about it from the cable provider. It used to be they have to come out and turn off your cable like they do other utilities. Now the app that you're accessing just turns you off. You just
right.
You try to access it, and it says, "I'll let you access for another day," but after that, you got to pay. And then it really makes efficiencies on their side more reality.
Yeah, the one that really gets me is the Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo stuff. Those things you forget about them, and they hit you all of a sudden. I see this $20 charge show up on my credit card bill for Nintendo, and I'm like, "What is this?" Well, you agreed to this a year ago. When my daughter wanted to play a game, I said, "Oh, what's $20? I'll sign up for it." Didn't realize I was signing up for a subscription.
That's right. Auto enrollment.
That's right.
Auto re-enrollment. Yeah, it happened to me over the holidays. I think I've been paying for some type of Xbox pass for 10 years now. Didn't even realize it until my son went to use some gift cards he had.
Right.
Okay. Almost last one, talks about desktop as a service. I keep harping on digital workspace. Desktop has been the digital workspace of choice since the early 90s. That's just part of the digital workspace experience. And for some people, even at XenTegra, I'd say half the company, when I ask them about their digital workspace, they really just talk about their VDI. And that's what they focus on, their desktop as a service provided by the company, not that login screen that has 50 different apps they could just launch without going to the desktop. So a big part of the experience still and going forward will be encompassing inside that Windows desktop, the user experience of this desire.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's going to be the way it is for a while. The digital workspace is critical to being able to get access to SaaS-based applications, but a lot of folks don't see that or don't understand it yet, and it's our job to help them understand it.
Right. And help to make them. So it's our job, right, to listen to what their needs are.
Right.
And if the right answer is, okay, here's a login that gets you to an icon where you click or auto launch a virtual desktop session, and that's what your current needs are for digital, then that's it. And we're done.
We need to evaluate and we need to evaluate their needs and help them understand how, if and how a digital workspace solution can address those needs, or whether they need a desktop or something else.
Right. And for most customers we've been talking to for a decade, that desktop would have been the answer. They just never got around to getting it done because the need wasn't there the way it is today, or they had some kind of hurdle that they weren't able to overcome. And that's where us and the vendors we work with can help.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Bill, I think we've covered it. Hopefully, maybe next week we'll get back to maybe a deeper dive technical conversation, but this is one that needs to come up every so often because people understanding this can make sense from a connectivity security perspective, from a scalable, cost-effective perspective, and from happy end users, while still making sure that we check all the necessary boxes to run a business. Those days are here. Like, this is not 20 years ago when we dreamed for these days. They're here now, and there's lots of reasons why people and companies need to be thinking this way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, Bill, great to be back and doing this. Hopefully we'll have Ben and others back next week. And I appreciate you joining for another session of the Citrix Session.
Of course, Andy, anytime.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.